for a raise if we have a clean audit. Unfortunately, we did not have a clean audit because of one entity within our stable, which is the trading entity, and we are going to be looking into the trading entity to make sure we have a clean audit. Audits of the Auditor General are very important to us in government because they are an indication of how we are dealing with the finances of the state, how we are dealing with any maladministration, whether there is any consequence management, etc. Now, when I got into this department, the Minister of Finance, one of the first things that he had said when he was giving his budget for the financial year in which I started as minister, he actually used very strong words around the matter of this Department of Water and Sanitation, that in fact we are bankrupt. So too did the Auditor General, emphasizing the fact that for a long time this department has been under scrutiny and has been in very bad shape insofar as the audit outcomes. Insofar as the audit outcomes have indicated, and so after having a number of sessions with the portfolio committee, with previous Minister Ngwinti, with various water boards, and between the DG and I was therefore able in my budget vote to commit that under my tenure, attention will be paid to the matter of corruption, because this has been a very important matter in my tenure as minister, that we should have, to the extent that it is possible, an administration that is as free of corruption as we would like to, because that is what would represent all of those people who made it possible for us to be in a democratic state. So we promised we would do everything to make sure that we can push back on any perception of corruption. And this was welcomed by the portfolio committee. This is what they had wanted to hear, because every one of them who spoke on this particular matter. The money that we were given was actually on loan. Am I correct, DG? The money that we were given for this year was on loan because we are already a bankrupt department. So the first thing that we did was to put together all those cases that were in the department that pertained to corruption or maladministration, etc., and put them in one basket so that we could deal with them as quickly as possible. This was done under the administration of the Director General, but we put a number of very competent people to oversee the process of making sure that we can deal with these cases, because we found something like 161 cases. We found 161 cases of so-called corrupt activity in the department. Some of the officials who would perform very significant work in the department had been put on suspension. And to get the department where we wanted to, we needed to make sure that we can clear this backlog, clear those who were not guilty so that they can come back and work, and those who were guilty, give the necessary sanction, to give also the assurance to society, to Parliament, that we are serious about the matter of dealing with corruption. It has taken the better part of my term in this administration dealing with these cases. So what we had wanted to do was to come and meet with yourselves and say, we have finished this section of cases that were allegedly corrupt, and some of the people in there were those people that were essential for the running of the department, but they had been put on suspension. We prioritized those cases that we thought were absolutely essential. The amounts will be dealt with by the DG. How much money has over the period of time, in the Department of Water, gone missing either through irregular expenditure or any other irregular and fruitful and wasteful expenditure. He'll give you a breakdown of that. But the amounts are staggering, and we need a great deal of support We need a great deal of support from Treasury. We need a great deal of support from Parliament. We need a great deal of support from the Portfolio Committee for us to be able to get the resources that we need. Our infrastructure in water is very badly in need of repair. We don't have the resources. Therefore, we've got to be able to show that the money that is given to us, we are able to look after it. So this was putting up our best face to say, we will look after this, and we have cleaned the system. We've got to the end of this, and our sincerest gratitude to those specialized people who assisted us in these particular cases. And we have the outcomes, and we are continuing with the investigation. But the ones that we prioritize were absolutely essential for us to understand exactly what had gone wrong. And we have had a few proposed suspensions, and the DG will pronounce on which ones those are without naming them. There have been suspensions. There have been various other ways in which we are able to say to the country that where we found wrong, we have made sure that it is stopped. Where we have found wrong, we have made sure that there is consequences that are attendant to that. Following that, the DG had established something that he called the Stabilisation Committee. DG is very big on big words. He had put together a committee that is called Stabilisation Committee so that we're able to stabilize the environment. And he had brought around him a number of people to assist him with this. And the Stabilizing Committee is now going to assist us to possibly restructure the department and make sure that those people whom we put in those positions of responsibility indeed have the necessary clearance and credibility and what do you call it? Fit for purpose. The committee that we had set up we're dealing specifically with matters that are related to maladministration, to fraud and corruption and misconduct, and making sure that we can improve our audit findings. The team that was overseeing this process was also charged with the responsibility of coming back to us to pointing out where we need to tighten on our policies, where we need to tighten up on our systems so that we can have the kind of environment that would reflect what our values are. We still have a huge backlog of investigations, and the team will be continuing, but the first batch has been announced, and I think it was put out in the paper. DG, am I correct? And the amount of money that is attached to those cases is out in there. We have found that over a period of time, this department has had systemic problems over maladministration, fraud, and corruption, and we're hoping that the systems that we've gone through, the issues that we have combed through, will assist us to have the kind of clean government that we look forward to, that would represent what we believe in. In all, we've already investigated 249 cases. 139 of them were found to be true and were referred to this particular disciplinary cases. 110 of them were found to be untrue, and therefore we removed them from the roll. Of the 139, I will leave to the DG to deal with in detail because that is his environment. Do you want to do it now or later, DG?
We'll do it later.
DG will do it later. Part of the process of making sure that we were in a state of preparedness to get a clean audit, we also audited a number of, our intention is to audit all our water boards because they are part and parcel of our delivery stable. And so far, we had started off with 2 and we're going to the 3rd one. And these ones were the ones that were most affected by drought, because when there's an instability and therefore a need to do things quickly is a time which is very much like the time we have now, is a time when auditors are particular about the way in which the processes have been followed. So we started with two forensic investigations, one in Amatola and another one in Lepelle, and there'll be a third one coming through, and so forth. We want to make sure that all our water boards are in a state that we can vouch for, that our resources there are looked after, because we need to convince Treasury, we need to convince the Portfolio Committee of our need for more resources, because we actually do need more resources than what has been given to us. The CEO of Amatola was asked by the board of Amatola to take precautionary leave, which is precautionary suspension, to allow the process of investigation to continue. The board of Lepelle met on Monday. They still have to give us a report on how they have dealt with their case in particular. We have taken a decision in view of the circumstances of these two boards, after we'd received the reports, to put them under some kind of executive focus, so that we are quite certain that those matters that we found were irregular will be attended to, so we can be certain that all our systems are in place. This we will do with every board that we have reason to go to. We will indicate that we would like the space to resolve the problems that will have come out of any investigation. We are hoping that when we go to the budget vote, having done this cleaning up, that our fortunes will be a little better than they have been in the past. Because as you know, we have put up an incredible system here at Rand Water to provide water everywhere. And we bought out all the tanks that we could find, and we put them out in various places. In some places we were very successful, in other places we were not successful because of the lockdown. We were not able to mount the tanks. But now that we are on stage 4, that has been lifted and the tanks are being mounted. We are also realizing that the first surge was very good, and I'm very proud of the work that was done. Thank you very much, CEO, for that, but there's no bonus that comes from me. And thank you very much to the DG and all the supporting staff who made that possible. It really, even for me, was an amazing sight to see the speed with which we were able to roll out those tanks. However, we have to look at the sustainability of that. Because it's one thing to put up an immediate response, which is what we need in a crisis. It's another matter to make sure that it is sustainable. Ideally, we would like to leave those tanks there because they are, until we can find ways in which we can improve our infrastructure to get to everybody. But the cost of taking water there is going to be prohibitive. We have brought with us here the chair of the Water Research Council, Chief Executive. Oh, did I promote you? The Chief Executive Officer of the Water Research Council, and he will indicate to you how we're going to try and find a balance between the cost of running water to the tanks and the sustainability of the whole project. So much later, we will give space to him and the DG to go into detail in explaining some of these things. But before I move off this one, I need to say that I have a group of people who are my advisors. They are people of incredible knowledge around the sector, and I put them together because of their wisdom around the sector. And on one occasion when I was in the country, my panel of advisors received a report about the concern around the extent of corruption over years that has been happening in the Department of Water. It was handed over to Professor Muller, and we will give him a space to come and hand over to me that particular report. It comes from an international organization that watches corruption in government, and he'll have a few words and hand over the report to me. That report will also be handed over to the DG for the processes that have been underway. We have also appointed a lawyer, a very experienced lawyer by the name of Terry Modau. Mr. Terry Modau is well known, I would like to think is well known for his investigation into the VBS matter. He's also very well known for his investigation into the Lepelle matter. He also worked in the department to deal with investigations of corruption in the department in 2016. So he's very familiar with the environment. He's very familiar with the area that he will be dealing with. So we now hand over to him to oversee the administration of what happens to these cases, how they are processed, and the outcomes of those cases. It releases the DG and I to deal with the core functions of the department, and he will be our legal representative in every way as things pan out. I want then to move over to another matter, and the other matter is the matter of an update on the Vaal. Most of you will know when we got into this environment, the Vaal was spilling over. The wastewater treatment plant had all the pumps there all but given up. Out of, I think, 44, very few of them were working, creating a real crisis situation in the Vaal. And our immediate response at that particular time, well, it happened before I became minister, but government's immediate response at that time was through the Minister of Finance, who called in the Defence Force to come in to clean up the area so that we're able to get engineers to get into the pumps and clean up the pumps so that we can use them. Because if the pumps are not working, then the spillage boils over and spills over onto the streets, and it is the most unsanitary situation and unacceptable situation. It has affected the businesses around the Vaal, it has affected the communities around the Vaal, and we needed to pay particular attention to this. On the first occasion when we went there, we accompanied the Deputy President. That is how much government was concerned about this matter. We accompanied the Deputy President there and had a look around. We also had the opportunity to thank the Defence Force as they disengaged. We then had a company that was indicated to be have the best engineers. It is a company that is attached to Eguruleni called Ervat, contracted to the municipality of Mfuleni to work on that particular spillage and make sure that we can clean it up. It's been a very long, difficult job. We've been there to look at the process, look at the progress that we are making, etc. And we are glad to say today that we've come to the point where we are now commissioning a bigger wastewater treatment plant. And we will cross over, I believe, to the Vaal so that we get a little brief from them, but it will be after everybody else has indicated what their 2 cents worth of communication is. We'll cross over to the Vaal and they will indicate what it is that they're doing. This is the biggest wastewater treatment plant that we have, and we're very, very proud that we're able to get to this point. We also want to have the opportunity to thank the community of the Vaal who have looked after this environment, and the people who have businesses there who have suffered greatly. They were of great use to us. We formed a partnership with them and we called it Working for the Vaal. And I'd like to have the opportunity when we cross over to thank them for all the support they have given us. I'd like to thank the lawyers and human rights lawyers for the cases that they had lined up against us, 7 cases that they'd line up against the Department of Human Settlements, that when they of water, when they realize our commitment to cleaning up the area, they readily withdrew the cases. So we can put that aside because, as you know, the process of being taken through the courts is a very long process, time-consuming, which we do not have. We will come back, therefore, to the Vaal when we get a little brief from the Vaal and have the opportunity to thank them for the work that they have done. I also want to have the opportunity to thank the staff of MEDSI. MEDSI is an entity under the municipality of Mfuleni that is responsible for the maintenance of the pumps, etc. We had a meeting with them about 2 weeks ago, and we had a very, very good engagement with them. And I'd like to have the opportunity to say thank you to them for holding the fort for us and on our behalf, and their dedication to their work. And we hope that they will continue to look after the premises and the pumps. The other matter that we wanted to communicate through you is that you do know that the Minister of Education is busy trying to put together all the elements that would make it possible for us as government to allow children to go back to school. She's been at this, and we've been in communication, and the responsibility of providing water and to some extent sanitation rests with us as per our agreement with the Minister of Education. And so we wanted to indicate to the country that we are in a state of preparedness to assist the Minister of Education have the necessary water in all the schools. At some point, the CEO will provide us with a map of where we've identified schools that need water and how we're going to provide that water, the water tanks and the water to those schools. The money will come from basic education, I believe. Yes. The services come from us, but they will be paying for the water. And the tanks already, most of the tanks that we have had been placed in schools because those were safe areas. So we will just continue and make sure we provide some more tanks for schools. When the CEO of Water Research Council takes his place here, he will also indicate to you some technological advancements that we would like to introduce to the schools, because it will be very difficult for us now to put the necessary infrastructure to be able to have the necessary sanitation as we need it out in the schools. This is something that came out of long drawn out research in the country led by Desigan, and he will indicate what it is that we are wanting to roll out and initiate in our schools. We call this the Brown Revolution. Am I correct, Desigan? And we had earlier on the fortune of being given support in a seminar that brought in most municipalities around the new innovative methods of dealing with sanitation. And this was covered by the Melinda and Bill Gates Foundation. To get over this, I think we've called it Belinda Foundation, and it works, or Melinda Foundation. But he will indicate to you what it is that we're wanting to support the schools. The total number of schools that have been identified across the country needing our support are 3,475. Am I correct?
The number keeps increasing.
Yes, it has gone up.
Yeah.
Okay. Initially, the number that we were given is 3,475, which means that the CEO has moved his bed and all his belongings to the command center, because to be able to ensure that we are covering these schools in the time that we have, and in time for the minister to be able to announce that we are ready for the schools to open, will need an outstanding effort. but I have great faith in the team around us. They have outperformed themselves, and with this responsibility as well, I am certain that they will be able to perform it with distinction. We've signed a memorandum of understanding with the Department of Basic Education. The memorandum of understanding is to make sure that they pay for the work, that they pay for the water, and we do the work, because we want to support them. They are part of what we are responsible for. And then finally, the progress that we are making on human settlements is very interesting, because we have discovered that there are ways that we can use in the short term, which is temporary shelter. And we gave over 50 houses over the weekend in Rodiport, in a community called Ikemeleng. And this community consists of people who were working in the farms around there and had been evicted by the farmers. They lived in 4 tents, and in total, there were about more than 100 people living there, more than 100 people living there. There was a woman who lost a baby because as they lived in tents and in the heavy storms that occurred earlier on in the year, her child was washed away by the flood, and it became a real tragedy because we could not retrieve the child. So we decided to prioritize this community so that such a misfortune does not happen again. We gave over 50 houses. These 50 houses were built within a week and 2 days, in the shortest possible time. And what we're trying to do is see if we cannot roll out all of this kind of alternative technology in the meantime, to make sure that we're able to move people as soon as possible into accommodation that is suitable for human beings, as opposed to where they were living that is not suitable for human beings. We've also had another type of alternative technology used in Mamelodi, Mabaya, am I correct? In Mamelodi, in a women's hostel, and that was given over this past week on Tuesday. I had hoped to be there, but unfortunately I was at a cabinet meeting, so I couldn't make it. But I am hoping that at some point, not too soon, I'll be able to go and visit them. The alternative technology that we're talking about is called alternative building technology, and we will be rolling it out in this particular period. This is undertaken by our Department of, our board, Housing Development Agency, and making sure that the standards are kept and the standards are adhered to. And we are wanting to give our people a view of something that is different, which can be done quicker and faster, is durable. And when I looked at the bungalows, that were 50 bungalows that were built in 1 week, I thought to myself, you know, sometimes when you have a crisis, you find a solution that actually works in the long term and works for a greater number of people than we have been able to cater for. Beyond that, we've also been working very rapidly to move people who have been on our waiting list to their houses. HDA has already moved quite a number of families to houses that were meant to be allocated to them. We've made special arrangement with council, because these might not actually have been allocated already, but we want to push that we have temporary allocation so that our people are able, within the informal settlements, to create the necessary spaces that make them provide social distance that you and I enjoy. Having said that, I now give over to the DG to indicate to us what the outcomes of the mission that we put together over corruption were, and how we have fared, how much money was lost by the department, and what we're going to do about what we have received. Do you want to change places, DG?
I can speak from you. Okay, thanks, Minister. Good afternoon. I'm sure we can still greet each other. Yeah. Good afternoon. Minister, I'm not going to waste much of your time. I think we are very much aware that yesterday we presented our annual report to the Portfolio Committee on Human Settlements. We presented that annual report yesterday because we wanted to demonstrate to the Portfolio Committee that we have turned the department around. I think that's very important. When we took over this organization, the organization was not a going concern, and that issue was flagged by the AG in the annual report. If you look at the 2017-2018 annual report, you would notice that the organization had accruals to the tune of about 2 billion rands.
Explain
In
what
fact, it
accruals
was more than 2 billion rands. Let me break it down for you. Accruals is work that has been done in previous years but not paid for. That's a simple definition of accruals. We refer to them as accruals and payables. So the organization had accruals and payables to the tune of about more than 2 billion rands. Now, once you have accruals, what accruals do, they eat up the value of your budget. They eat up the value of your money. So you end up spending money that you don't have. So our target was to make sure that we reduce those accruals. We presented the financial turnaround plan to the Portfolio Committee. In fact, the APP, which is the annual performance plan of this current year, was only approved on condition that we present a financial turnaround plan to Parliament. And we presented that financial turnaround plan to Parliament, and we talked to it yesterday as we were presenting our annual report. Now you can see all of the figures are going in the right direction. If you read the annual report, you'll notice that all these figures are going in the right direction, whether it's your accruals, whether it's your overdrafts, they're all going in the right direction because that's what will make us a going concern. Now, the big figure that you probably picked it up yesterday is that figure of irregular expenditure. Minister has touched on it. Irregular expenditure is to the tune of about 16.6 billion rands. Now, irregular expenditure will not be condoned. It's not going to go away until you go after the wrongdoers. That's how it gets condoned. And that figure is going to remain in the annual report until you go after the people who caused it in the first place. And in simple language, that is called consequence management. We presented yesterday to the Portfolio Committee and Parliament that we've written to Treasury to condone an amount of about 10 billion rands. Out of that 16 billion, we have written to Treasury to condone the 10 billion rands. The word condoning means that Treasury has to regularize the 10 billion rands that we have spent over the years. And that 10 billion rands is money that was spent irregular. It's the process that was implemented in an irregular way. So we need to condone it. This is an accounting concept for regularizing processes that did not go well. For that to happen, then you have to demonstrate to Treasury that consequence management is implemented. There will be no condonation of 10 billion rands without consequence management. And that's exactly what we did yesterday, was to demonstrate that out of these 10 billion rands, the people who were involved in the implementation of that irregular expenditure have been charged. Some have been dismissed, some have been given a 3-month suspension without pay, others have resigned. Those that have resigned, we still have a way to chase them, especially if there's criminal activity involved. And there are cases where we have opened, I think about 21 cases with the South African police. Just to give you an idea of what we are talking about, the Minister has given these figures, but we did not break them down. We have about 11 officials out of the 138 officials that have been found guilty in the department. 11 of them were officials who were found guilty. They are at management level, what we call SMS in government. About 86 of the officials who were found guilty are between level 1 and level 12. Level 12 is middle management, and level 1 is your general workers. So you have 86 people who have been found guilty. And in total, that gives you a figure of about 97. There were, at management level, 2 officials who were not found guilty. At salary level 1 to 12, there were 14 officials who were not found guilty. Minister has covered this. So in total, out of the 138 officials who were found guilty, you had 16 officials who were not found guilty. And this gives you a clear demonstration that our forensic investigators are doing a good job. Because out of the investigations that they have done, you have 86 officials at level 1 to 12 and 11 officials at level 13 to 16 were found guilty. And this gives you a very good success rate. What we want to demonstrate to you is that there were people who were dismissed. For instance, 13 people were dismissed at salary level 12, 1 to 12. There were demotions at salary level 1 to 12. There were warning letters. There were final written warning letters. There were 1 month suspensions, 2 month suspensions, 3 month suspensions, and 15-day suspensions. And remember, all of these suspensions are suspensions without pay, because we want to hit the pocket. We want to hit where it's going to hurt you the most. So if we suspend you for 3 months, it means you don't get your salary. That talks to consequence management. Now, I want to get to the part about the entities. Minister has covered it very well. I'm not going to waste much of your time. We have taken a decision to put the 2 entities, Lepelle Northern Water and Amatola Water, under executive caretaker arrangement. In other words, we're saying to deal with governance issues in these 2 organizations, we need to put them under an executive caretaker. The reason why we're doing this is because we want to make sure that we stabilize the governance of these 2 organizations. Please go back and look at the annual report of the 2 organizations. There are issues around irregular expenditure in the 2 organizations. There are issues around fruitless and wasteful expenditure in these 2 organizations. In fact, we should have put them under administration from day one. But what Minister wanted to do is to apply her mind and make sure that we manage the processes and we manage them very well. The other issue that has been brought to the attention of the minister is this issue of providing water to schools. The figure has gone up, and I'm sure the CEO is going to give us the exact figure. The DG of Basic Education has signed an implementation protocol with myself and with the CEO. The Department of Basic Education has put an amount of about 600 million rands aside to make sure that all the 3,000 plus schools have water and sanitation. Rainwater is going to be managing that program on our behalf. They will be our implementing agent. They've got a very good infrastructure here to manage that particular program. They have appointed a CPO, a Chief Procurement Officer, to do exactly that. They're also activating what is called the emergency procurement, what is normally referred to as SCM Node 3, if you use the PFMA or the National Treasury regulations. So they've already done that. They have negotiated with all the suppliers in the country. They have negotiated with all the associations in the country to make sure that we achieve the target that Minister and the Minister of Education have contracted to achieve. It doesn't make sense for us to get the children back to school if there is no water. We can't be asking them to wash hands where there is no water. So we will be prioritizing this. We do have the budget. We will also be working with our regional teams. We will be working with the regional officials from the Department of Basic Education. We will be working with municipalities as well to make sure that we do consult all the structures on the ground. I wanted to cover that part, but our main goal is to make sure that get this department back on track, is to make sure that we turn this organization around, is to make sure that we execute consequence management. There is a perception out there that people are getting away with impunity. There are a lot of wrong things that are being done in the organization, but there's no consequence management. But the figures speak for themselves. If you look at all of these figures, it tells you clearly that we are executing consequence management. In fact, as we speak, there are quite a number of senior officials who have been charged. There are a number of senior officials at DDG level, senior officials at chief director level, We have been charged and we have been suspended. So we are executing consequence management. Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you. I think we'll now ask Desigan to come through and then we'll cross over to the Vaal. Desigan, if you could come through and explain to us how we're going to provide support to the education department and make our schools safer places for our children to go back to school.
Colleagues, this is Mr. Desigan Naidu. He's the CEO of the Water Research Commission. And that's who it is.
Oh,
Minister, maybe before the CEO takes over, colleagues, we know that we've been required to wear masks, all of us. Could colleagues please make use of those? The only two people that are an exception are the two ladies that are assisting us with the sign language issue because of the work that they do. Just again, thanks.
Thank you, Sputnik. Good afternoon, Minister and colleagues. I just want to start by saying that the place that we're in, as difficult as it is, has opportunity. You know, when President Barack Obama signed the American Recovery Act in 2008, he spoke about this notion that you're in a crisis, you're going to make an investment. You should preferably try to make as much of that investment as possible as a building block to get to a much better place. And this is exactly the view that we're taking around the emergency interventions in water and in sanitation and in housing. So what we're looking for here is that, I mean, there are certain things that you do that is a sunk cost. You're not going to get a recovery from it. But there are other things that you can do that become the building blocks to the future system. So the tanks, the harvesting tanks that are being now placed all over the country is a very necessary augmentation for the long term around water security in the system. The work that is being envisaged for the schools, and there are two legs now. The one leg that was spoken about at some length today is around ensuring the water supply. There should be no school in the country that will be without water and reasonable water security throughout the year. Absolutely. The second thing is around sanitation. And the sanitation story, which is now being accelerated, actually started last year when the president announced the SAFE program, the Sanitation Appropriate for Education program, the school sanitation program. And the reality about where we are in this country is that there are some places that will have access to regular sewage sanitation. And even there, we have to become much more efficient about how we use it. And many places in the country where that's not going to be possible in the short term or even in the long term. And so what we are putting into the space is organizing for new and innovative solutions to be able to be rolled out the schools, and then the schools become an example of what can happen in the local communities, and that has a knock-on effect on the economy as a whole. And this is not an isolated project in South Africa. South Africa is one of the big pilot phases in the world. The Gates Foundation has sponsored something called the Reinvent the Toilet program that is being proliferated around the world. And they have made a special allocation to us in South Africa to get free licenses on some of these new inventions to be able to use in the school environment in particular, and maybe even a little beyond that. So to give you an idea of the kinds of things that we're looking at is, one, we're looking at non-sewage sanitation solutions, because one of the big issues that we have is the capital expenditure associated with putting a sewage system in place. Non-sewage systems are now becoming viable all over the world, and South Africa is only the second country in the world that actually has a national... Okay. South Africa is only the second country in the world that has a national standard for non-sewage sanitation. And in this domain, what we're looking at are two things. One is a very safe sanitation solution for the kids and then for the public at large eventually. But we're also looking at the back end of this where we can beneficiate the waste. Because if you're going to have non-sewage systems, then the waste has to be done right where it is. And this is the brown revolution that Minister has been talking to. So we're looking at some very sophisticated systems like electrocoagulation that can completely deal with the waste where it is, to things that we are much more familiar with, like biodigestion, where the waste is withdrawn from the toilet system and processed on site, and you have byproducts like energy, like biogas, and the simplest of systems, where we're using poor flush systems in some of these isolated areas, where with a minimal of water, we can provide a very safe solution for all of the kids. It is really imperative that we're organizing for this to be the building block of what the future sustainability is going to be around us. Now, exactly the same is true in the water domain. So the tanks are there to augment the water security in these different places. Temporarily, because this is the emergency intervention, we are using water tankers to get the water to those places. In the medium term, we're looking for alternative sources. We're talking about using groundwater as a great option where it is available, piped water in other cases, fog water harvesting in other cases, sometimes a composite of many different kinds of solutions, possibly even desalination, depending on what the situation is and where the locality is. And a combination of this should allow us to reflect in about 5 years from now, a system that has a much higher level of water security than we had even before this pandemic. And this is really, really critical. Then the last point I want to raise, Minister, is the issue of wastewater. Now, we know that a very big part of our strategy, as was announced by the President and Cabinet, and then later in much more detail by the Advisory Council that's advising Cabinet currently on this, the Health Advisory Council, a key component is the surveillance component. Person-to-person testing, which is now a priority around the country, and we're already reaching the 400,000 mark on the tests, is not going to be sustainable financially in the long term. So we are deriving a system, Minister, together with many of our international partners, of using wastewater as a community level indicator for the surveillance of the virus and many other diseases inside the system. Microbiological diseases, chemicals inside the system, as well as emerging pollutants. And we want to set up the system so that we can have the benefit of this crisis, giving us a long-term monitoring solution to make sure that our entire systems are clean, hygienic, and safe for both human beings as well as the environment. I think I will stop here.
Thank you. But you'll be available for questions.
Yes.
Then, thank you very much. The next item would be asking Professor Muller to please come and give us a brief on the report that he had wanted to give over to the Minister. And we are here very willing to receive and follow through all of this. We want to have a clean department. It's taken us a long time as a government. Various other attempts have been made, but I think we're coming to a point now where we will be able to. I don't know where that sound comes from. Could we find a way of toning it down, please?
Minister, I think it may come from the Vaal looking behind us as our friends. I think they're dialing.
Oh, sorry.
Not sure, but it could be.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Minister. Good afternoon, colleagues. Thanks for the opportunity. To the media, and I'm going to be a little naughty because otherwise you won't hear me at the back, I know. Just to say that the report I'm here to present to the Minister, water money down the drain about corruption in the water sector, has been released previously, as the Minister indicated, and the media's had access to it, but it's a very important opportunity for us to deliver it to the Minister. I need to emphasize that this is a cooperative project. It was produced by two organizations, Corruption Watch from South Africa. I'm sure you all know Corruption Watch. They were once the local sponsor, and the and the Water Integrity Network, which is an international organization based in Berlin. Or perhaps it's somebody trying to log on to the UIF system to claim that. Just listening to how many hashes there are. Water Integrity Network is established internationally.
Somebody could be hacking.
To try and ensure that in this water sector, we reduce as far as possible this problem of corruption. We have to acknowledge that corruption is like a virus. It's more deadly. Oh. No, I think I'm being censored, yeah. Let me try again. Hmm?
Coming from outside?
No, not from outside. Someone is dialing in.
Okay. Should I try again?
Hopefully, we're dialing in.
Okay, so the Water Integrity Network is a global network trying to reduce corruption in the water sector. And the problem, as we know, is that, I need to repeat this, corruption is like a virus. It spreads very slowly, it gets right through a society and a system, and it causes death and damages livelihoods in very much the same way as the coronavirus, but it's not as visible. Where there's corruption in water, which moves money out of the water sector for the wrong reasons or does the wrong things, in the absence of safe water and adequate sanitation, children die, jobs are lost, and we need to stop corruption. Now, the report documents many of the examples that have happened in South Africa in the past, and we have to say thanks to the media that's brought these to our attention. And you don't need to go into any detail about this. Looking backwards, we know what's happened.
Can't hear you.
Island of integrity. The first step, and the DG's already referred to that, is that there must be consequences for the things that have gone wrong over the past 5-10 years, which we all know about. And he's illustrated already some of the action that's been taken to deal with the past. The other area where we make a recommendation is we say that integrity can only come from people. If we don't have ethical and honest people in the water sector running our organizations, we will be at risk of corruption. So what we've suggested is we need to return to the principles of sound administration, which means that we need the right people appointed to do the right jobs in the right way. And that means quite often we need to have the right processes for appointments, to appoint the right people in the right jobs, to make sure that the people who are in the jobs are there with some security to do the right things. So one of the problems that the department still has is a large number of acting managers, and acting managers can never do as good a job as people who are permanently in post, because they always depend on the grace and favor of somebody else. And when we appoint the boards of our institutions, we need to make sure they're selected for the right reasons with the right criteria, probably using, as is widely recommended, independent appointment procedures, or at least procedures that have independent input into them. We have to stop this shuffling around of staff, officials, and board members, because that actually destabilizes the organization and can lead to corruption. So, Minister, that's in very brief. You've heard some of this before, but it's my pleasure to give you a copy of the report, a very large media-sized copy. There's a small one available as well. Thank you very much. And of course, because we know that you're electronically literate, the means to distribute it. And if I can, indeed, thank you very much. And if I can give to the Director General as well, his copy and his electronic version. And I hope that it contributes to the work of the department and the minister, and enables us to ensure that the limited money we have as we move forward is effectively used, and that we save more lives and more livelihoods by running our water well. Minister, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Shall we?
Yeah. Now we will cross over, which is the final stage of our work. We'll cross over to the Vaal to be able to say thank you to all those wonderful people that have helped us to get to where we are. We are now about to start the last phase, a very exciting phase. And when we put up the building blocks, would you want to come down? When we put up the building blocks, we will invite you to that. And we hope COVID will be over and we'll be able to celebrate beyond water, just have a little color in water, sugar, because it is something that we really are very proud of at this level. Do you want to come and say a few words? Or do you want to take us through to?
Okay.
The gentleman who's just joined us is the provincial head of the Department of Water and Sanitation in Gauteng. So the Vaal is part of his problem. So he'll say a few words before we cross over to the colleagues that are at the Vaal.
It's part of his solution.
But he's part of the solution. That's from the boss. So yeah, Spu, and then we can go to Vaal in the Vaal.
Thank you, Sputnik. Colleagues, I think we come to a very significant mile in the Vaal in terms of what needs to happen. Can you hear me?
Technology is wicked.
We're in the middle of
Been hacked.
You almost saw them.
All right.
Okay, continue.
All right. Okay. We know that the pollution in the Vaal has been a biggest problem that we have had for a number of years. Now we're going to be going out on a big contractor mobilization starting in the next month of July, where we want to deal with all the treatment plants in the Vaal for Meatin, Ritzspread, Lugale, and Sebokeng, as well as all the 44 pump stations in Mfuleni to make sure that they are properly functional. Maybe let me just stop there for now, Minister.
Okay.
So we're starting as of the next July. We've done a lot of work also on some of the operations and maintenance, working with our partners in this. Maybe Minister did mention that in July, end of July, we should be completing Module 6 in Sebokeng, which will contribute significantly in terms of the reduction of the sewer. I'm sure the Minister will invite the media to come in for that launch.
I just want to cross over now to the people out there, and the gimmicks will not detract us from the important job that we are at right now. And I